A number of you are getting more and more worried about increasing wars around the world, or possible World War III or something like that between some of the major powers, and you have asked, where is the best place to live, or the best countries to live, or the best regions to live to be most protected in case there is a major scale or full-scale wars somewhere in the world? I am Caleb Jones. This is Sovereign CEO. I teach people just like you how to create location-independent businesses, or move to a less bad country, or at least set up an international backup plan, and do all these things for very little money. So, right off the bat, I am not an alarmist. Most of you know this. When the cerveza sickness hit and everyone freaked the fuck out and said we're all gonna die and there'll be body bags piled up in every city in the world, I said, nope, that's not gonna happen. You gotta calm down. When various people, including people I like and respect, say, oh my God, the entire US economy is gonna collapse into Mad Max World War III and it's gonna happen, and they give a very specific date, I say, no, that's not gonna happen, it's not gonna happen that soon. So even though I do talk about things like the Western world collapsing, because it is, that's a fact, that's not my opinion, and even though I talk about things like most countries of the world embracing authoritarianism in the wake of the cerveza sickness, which again is a fact and not my opinion, I am still not a crazy alarmist. I don't freak out and go insane irrationally. I've done many videos about this, and I will probably continue to talk about this in the future. So do I think there will be a World War III anytime soon, if ever? No, I don't. The elites who run the world would lose too much money in a world war, in a World War II, World War I type scenario, where all these countries go to war and there's massive damage to cities all over the planet, nuclear war, what have you. So no, I consider the odds of an actual real world war or world type war between the quasi-superpowers, China, Russia, United States, what have you, as extremely unlikely. It is really not something I'm worried about. Where the elites do make a lot of money are, and I've talked about this before in my blogs, are little wars, proxy wars. There's a reason the United States is in 8 different wars right now, 8 different little tiny wars, and most Americans don't even know. The reason for that is little wars are very, very profitable for the elites. And it's not just America. You can talk about Saudi Arabia, China, Russia. Little wars are what the elites like. They do not like big, giant infrastructure-based wars. That is very unlikely to occur. So this is a fear I don't have. Now, could there be an increasing level of proxy wars around the world, an increasing amount of small wars? Yes, that could happen. That is entirely possible. Could there be a cyber war, limited cyber warfare? Yes, that is also possible. So I'm just giving this disclaimer here that even though I'm talking about how to protect yourself in case of a war, I don't really think you're going to run into any big worldwide scale wars in our lifetimes. I think that era has passed. Second thing that is very important to understand about this is a video I did last year called Where Can You Be in 72 Hours? You can watch it right here. Matter of fact, if you haven't watched that video, I strongly suggest you click that right now, watch that video, and then come back here. The summary of that video is that you need to have the wherewithal to be in another country. That means your feet are on the ground in that country within 72 hours at any given point in time. If you set up a plan B, an international backup plan, which I think you should, I think that's very prudent these days for a number of reasons. I have many of them myself. If you set up that plan B to get out in case there is a war, but it takes you a month or 2 or 3 to actually get over there and get situated over there, then it kind of doesn't help, does it? You need the infrastructure in place where you can literally be out of your country and have your feet on the ground in your backup country within 72 hours. And if you can't do that, a lot of the advice I'm going to give you in this video doesn't really help unless you decide to move to one of these countries and live there full time. All right, so with that all the way, here's the bottom line. It is primarily an issue of hemispheres. What? Yes, specifically the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere on the Earth. As you may or may not be aware, the vast majority of the human race lives in the northern hemisphere, the northern top half of the globe. Only a very small percentage comparatively live below the equator. Matter of fact, most of the landmass of the planet Earth is on the northern side, on the northern hemisphere, much less of it on the southern hemisphere. So that's important to note. That means that the most potential problems you will have with warfare and things like economic factors. So that's an important fact to understand. That means that the potential for warfare and terrorism or things like economic impact, global warming, if you left-wingers are worried about that kind of thing, negative environmental problems, are going to mostly affect disproportionately the Northern Hemisphere. Now, on top of that, the big, giant, swinging dick countries of the world who are most likely to engage in warfare against smaller countries or each other, like United States, China, Russia, Western Europe, are all, guess what, in the Northern Hemisphere. So again, in terms of risk, you're looking at the Northern Hemisphere and you're looking at the Southern Hemisphere for less risk. By the way, before I continue, you should subscribe to this channel if you find this content helpful to you. You can also click that dumb notification bell, put a like on this video, and leave a comment on this video. It doesn't matter what you say. The more interactivity I get on this content, the more this content I will provide for you for free, so you're just helping yourself. Now, on top of the fact that most of the landmass and population is in the Northern Hemisphere, something else is very interesting. And I am not 100% on what I'm about to say, but the limited research that I have done on this, it seems to clearly indicate this to me. I am not an expert and I could be wrong. And if you believe I am wrong, please put it in the comments. But my understanding is that the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere operate on two separate weather patterns, two separate patterns in terms of air currents and things like that. So that means that if you have, for example, a nuclear exchange, not a worldwide nuclear war, but some kind of nuclear exchange, and again, I think the odds of this are low, but if you have some kind of nuclear exchange, it will overwhelmingly likely happen somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere, and the weather patterns and environment of the Southern Hemisphere will be, if not unaffected, much less affected than the Western Hemisphere. So that is yet another reason why the Southern Hemisphere is much safer from these kinds of problems than the Northern Hemisphere. Matter of fact, if you want help trying to figure out a country to move to, maybe in the Southern Hemisphere, or an international backup plan, you can go to escapeplancourse.com. That's my course that shows you the entire planet Earth and how to locate a country that is the best country for you, and then step-by-step instructions on how to actually move to that country. Kind of nice. So in terms of the safest region to live in or have an international plan be in to be protected against things like warfare is the Southern Hemisphere. So look at a world map, look at the equator, and anything below that line, that's going to be a lot safer. Now, there are some other factors that come into play. I'll cover those now. One is that you want to make sure you live in a country, and I've talked about this many times in my other Five Flags content, that doesn't border any hostile enemies. You want to make sure you live in a country where the countries that are adjacent to that country, that physically border that country, are friendly to that country. I live in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. I'm not there now. Unfortunately, I'm back in the United States, as you can tell from my background. But I live in the UAE, and that borders two countries that are very friendly to it. Strong allies to the UAE. That'd be Saudi Arabia and Oman. So I'm in a country that is pretty good in terms of adjacent enemies. Not bad. This is also why I decided to not move to countries I really like Georgia, which is a great country, but unfortunately borders Russia, who is controlled by a tyrant who likes to invade countries whenever the hell he feels like it. Matter of fact, he already invaded Georgia in 2008. Or countries like Armenia, one of my favorite countries in the whole world, but unfortunately, Armenia borders Azerbaijan. So if you just make sure you live in a country, non-Western collapsing country, that doesn't border any countries hostile to that country, you've covered a lot of bases in terms of your statistical risk factor of things like wars and things of that nature. Another thing that is equally important is to not live in a country that is tied down by numerous treaties where it will be forced to go to war if any of its allies go to war. What was the dumbest war, the dumbest major war in all of human history? The answer is World War I. World War I is a tragedy of historic proportions because it is literally the dumbest war we've ever had. The reason the whole world went to war is because two little teeny tiny European countries went to war against each other over some stupid reason that didn't matter, but they had allies. And so this country said, hey, allies, you have to attack this country. And the other country said, hey, allies, you have to defend me against this country. And so those allies said, well, hey, allies, you have to help us. And you have to help us, and you have to help us, and you have to help us, and you have to help us on both sides. And suddenly the whole world was in a war against each other. Stupid. If you live in a country that is tied down by numerous treaties where it was required to go to war if any of its treaty partners go to war, like the United States, then you are at a higher risk profile for being involved in a dumb war. That's why, for example, I would never live in Australia or New Zealand, even outside of the authoritarian cerveza sickness restrictions they have down there, because those two countries, even though they are in the Southern Hemisphere, which is good, are locked down by numerous treaties where they're going to have to go to war if the United States goes to war or various of their other allies ever go to war. Kind of dumb. So when you factor all of those factors together and you look at a world map, in terms of the countries that are the best countries to live in or have as a plan B to avoid problems like warfare, you're basically talking about South America. Basically. I mean, yes, maybe you can talk about Africa too, although that's not a place that most of you would want to live in. So you're really talking about South America. There is a reason why my second home is the country of Paraguay. Paraguay is a little teeny tiny country in the middle of South America that nobody cares about, that has no international trade with big Western powers, that doesn't have all these treaties with these other countries, that does its own little thing, that's deep in the Southern Hemisphere and will be very safe in case there is a major full-scale war in the Northern Hemisphere. And unlike most of you, I have the wherewithal to be in Paraguay within 72 hours, no matter where I am. If I'm in Dubai, if I'm in Asia, if I'm in North America like I am now, within 72 hours, my wife and I can both be on the ground in Paraguay and safe. So that's one of the many reasons I chose Paraguay as my second home. I also really like Paraguay for lots of other reasons, but you get my point. So that's basically it. I would, again, strongly recommend that you watch this video on where can you be in 72 hours. Do you have that infrastructure in place in your life? Watch that video. It's super critical if this is an issue of importance for you. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.